It's an honour to welcome you here today for the Margaret Thatcher Lecture. I'm Robert Colville, Director of the Centre for Policy Studies, or for our Canadian friends, je suis Robert Colville, le Directeur du Centre d'études politiques, and that's the last of my French. That's the last. Yeah. A star at GCSE. The Margaret Thatcher Lecture was established in honour of the woman who, with Sir Keith Joseph, set up the Centre for Policy Studies 52 years ago, and in the process launched an intellectual and political revolution whose effects will be felt far beyond Britain's shores. The Thatcher Lecture is for the big beasts, the big hitters. We've had a serving Chancellor, a serving US Secretary of State, Rupert Murdoch, Charles Moore, Boris Johnson. So when we were planning our latest Thatcher Lecture, I told the team I wanted to find a leading Conservative who spoke to the next generation, someone who was robustly and unapologetically pro-house building, pro-home ownership, pro-aspiration, and he only had to go 3,500 miles to find one. But we did not just ask Pierre to deliver this lecture purely because he desperately wants to build more houses, although it doesn't hurt. Nor did we invite him to deliver this lecture because everyone in Britain has started paying a lot more attention to Canadian politics recently, and in particular to the way in which an insurgent populist right-wing party called Reform rose up to challenge an establishment Conservative party in the wake of a landslide election defeat. Although, again, it didn't hurt. No, we invited him for two reasons. The first is because of the philosophy and principles he espouses. Pierre is one of those rare politicians who not only cites Adam Smith and Milton Friedman, but has actually read them. When he was asked in 2019 what event, book or song had made the biggest impression on his political thinking, the answer he gave was Friedman's Capitalism and Freedom, which he read as a 14-year-old in Calgary and set him on the path to where he is today. In 2008, as a young MP, he argued that the wealth of nations was as important as the US Declaration of Independence in shaping the modern world. Those are answers I feel Baroness Thatcher would have very much approved of. But like Lady Thatcher, Pierre has applied those great economic insights to the problems of today. The conservatism he champions is one that is based on the working classes and working people, on fixing problems so that young people stuck living in their parents' basement have the jobs, the opportunities, and, yes, the housing that they need to thrive. It is a conservatism that squares the circle between traditionalism and populism, that looks and speaks to the future rather than the past. And it is a conservatism that resonates with the Conservatives under Pierre's leadership, winning a record number of votes in the recent federal election, and surely winning many more had it not been for a certain noisy neighbour to the south. But the second reason for inviting Pierre to come to Britain is that it feels as if both of our countries are trying to solve the same problems. On her visits to Canada, Lady Thatcher constantly stressed the ties of family and ideology which bound our countries together. In 1983, for example, she told the Canadian Parliament, "The ideals which our two countries share are the answer to all the doubters. For centuries we have striven to first to win, then to preserve that freedom and justice without which life has neither dignity nor meaning. We have learned by experience that the only political system which protects and perpetuates these values is parliamentary democracy." Those are words which I'm sure everyone in this room would agree with, but some of what Baroness Thatcher said strikes an uneasy chord today. Again, speaking to the Canadian Parliament, she said that Canada and Britain share not only common ideals, but also the will and capacity to defend them. I'm not sure anyone who's looked at the state of the British Armed Forces would share that verdict at the moment. I can't speak to Canada's situation. Likewise, in another address to the Canadian Parliament, she paid tribute to the economic reforms carried out under Brian Mulroney and others in the 1980s. Both our countries, she argued, have come a long way since the days when people thought that you could spend and borrow your way to prosperity, that you needed a budget deficit and a bit of inflation to get economic growth. I wouldn't say we've come beyond the idea that tax and spend delivers growth. We just had a spring statement today, for example. There were less said about that, the better. And in that same speech, Mrs. Thatcher cited an Anglo-Canadian writer, Goldwin Smith, who decades ago had spoke of nations that were rich by nature and poor by policy. This, she argued, had been both of our problems in the 1970s. And looking at our GDP figures and the state of our living standards, this is both of our problems in the 2020s. Which is why it's so encouraging to hear from politicians like Pierre who are committed to reversing the courses that have set us to be poor by policy. I'd like to welcome you all today. I'd like to thank Pierre and his team. I'd like to thank the board, supporters and staff of the Centre for Policy Studies, and in particular Emma Revel and Camille Cross. To Daniel Hannan, who as a research fellow at the CPS has been the presiding genius behind this event. After that first visit to Canada in 1983, the British High Commission reported back to London that Thatcher's visit has been an immense success. Her conviction, eloquence, mastery of detail, unflagging energy, and interest in Canada have made a profound impression here on Canadians of all political persuasions, which is exactly the sort of honest, unbiased, and unsparing feedback that every politician wants from their staff. So it's tempting fate, given he has yet to speak, but I invite you to join with me in experiencing and hopefully celebrating the conviction, eloquence, mastery of detail, unflagging energy, and interest in Britain of the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, the Honourable Pierre Poilievre.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, mon cher ami, and thank you to all the assembled guests, in particular the Conservative members of Parliament who hopped over the pond from Canada to be with me. We have Taco Van Popta, Alex Ruff, and Eric Duncan, and of course, thank you to Robert for hosting me here for this wonderful hall, and to my great friend, Daniel Hannan, the man with the encyclopedic mind that I regularly plunder, a man who explained how the English people invented freedom, and a man who is uniting New Zealand, Australia, the United Kingdom, and Canada in a beautiful alliance for the future. Thank you very much for welcoming me. Merci beaucoup. But you'll forgive me if I'm a little bit wired and tired, but we have this thing called jet lag, which I solve with caffeine. And the strangest phenomenon came to my attention when I visited one of your fine coffee shops here in London. I went to pay and I took my beverage, and after I said, "Thank you," the woman said something very bizarre. She didn't say, "You're welcome." She said, "Thank you." And it occurred to me, this is not the sequence that our mothers taught us, which was supposed to be "thank you, you're welcome," but instead it was "thank you, thank you." Now, reflect on all the transactions you do in an open market. Almost all of them have that same strange sequence. Thank you, thank you. Why? Because the money that I gave her is worth more than the coffee she parted with to get it. And the coffee I took from her was worth more than the money, I can assure you, with the jet lag. And that is the nature of the free market. Both parties have to be better off, or they wouldn't choose to participate in it. If I have an apple and want an orange, and you have an orange and want an apple, and we exchange, we're both richer, even though we still just have an apple and orange between us, because now we have something more valuable to us than we had before. If there's any doubt, I prefer apples to oranges, but that's just me. Each of us have different preferences. Voluntary exchange of the work for wages, product for payment, and investment for interest benefits all participants in a free market, or else they wouldn't choose to participate. By contrast, everything government does, it does by the force of mandatory taxation. Even the things we agree it must do, like fund a military, it has to be done through the coercion of the state. And that's why no one writes "thank you" on their tax forms. And even though theoretically it's supposed to be a transaction, you don't get the same mutual gratitude that you do in a free exchange. Now, even though we're in England, I hope I don't create a diplomatic incident by quoting a great Scot to kick off my remarks. But this Monday will be the 250th anniversary of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. I like that. Hey. We got to get some of that in our House of Commons. As he wrote, "What is prudence in the conduct of every private family can scarce be folly in that of a great kingdom. Put simply, when people can decide what to do for themselves, they make themselves and all of us better off. What is good for the parts are even better for the sum. Free exchange is the key to the well-being of commoner and country. As he said, commerce ought naturally to be among nations, as among individuals, a bond of friendship." His books were long, but his principles simple. Free trade, free markets, free nations. And that is the theme of this speech. Canada must become stronger at home so that we have unbreakable leverage abroad. Opening trade with like-minded free nations will do that. by diversifying markets, lowering costs for consumers, and boosting wages for workers. Smith is probably the best known and least read economist. For that reason, he's often misunderstood. If you Google "father of capitalism," his name and face will pop up. Yet, the word capitalism, or capitalist, does not appear in either The Wealth of Nations or in the Theory of Moral Settlements. He never used the term. He did not preach the supremacy of capital over labor, but the free and voluntary exchange of the two. Indeed, he believed that labor was the core of all value. And, quote, "the annual labor of every nation is the true source of wealth." And he warned against profits earned through state protection rather than open competition. Nor did he glorify greed. When he wrote that we expect our dinner not from the benevolence of the butcher, brewer, or baker, but from their own self-interest, he was not glorifying greed, but rather describing obvious incentives. In the Theory of Moral Sentiments, in fact, he reminds us that human beings are bound together by something he called sympathy, by placing ourselves in the other person's situation and seeing through their eyes. Thus, our interest becomes their interest. Indeed, if sympathy means caring truly and actively about the other fellow's wants and needs, then no one is more sympathetic than the entrepreneurial businessman who gets ahead by supplying the needs and wants of others. Others who must choose voluntarily to transact with him because what they get from him is worth more than what it costs. And that is the nature of free enterprise business. If you want to sell what the consumer buys, you have to see through the consumer's eyes. Smith did not invent the free market economy. He discovered it just at the moment in history when these economies were embracing it over serfdom. So we can compare the before and after to see which approach worked. Before 1776, there was literally no economic growth. Estimates by Angus Madison show that between the year 1 and the year 1700, per capita GDP, measured in 1990 dollars, grew from about $444 to $615 in 1700 years, meaning barely any growth in living standards in those 17 centuries. From 1820 to 2000, per capita GDP went from $667 to $5,700. Now let me put this into context. On average, in the free market period, the economy would grow as much in 1 year as it would have grown in the average 200 years in the pre-free market period. Life expectancy literally doubled from the year 1800 to 75 from 35. And then there's transportation. Winston Churchill famously noted that Sir Robert Peel in 1841 took just as long to go from London to Rome as a Roman Empire would have taken to go from Rome to London 2,000 years or earlier. In other words, there was literally no improvement in transportation technology in that 2 millennia. Then, in a little more than a century, we went from horses and sailboats to jet engines and men on the moon. More advancement in a century and a half of free enterprise than in the prior 2,000 years combined. For generations, free markets lowered costs, raised wages, and lifted billions out of poverty. Yet, they are facing major pushback today from the twin threats of socialism and protectionism. That risks turning the wealth of nations into the poverty of the people. How did this happen? The answer, if we're being honest, is that there is a backlash because working people across the Western world have been thoroughly betrayed. Wages lag, housing is out of reach, energy costs soar, opportunities blocked, and the silent thief of inflation has robbed buying power. The state took from the hardworking many to enrich the privileged few. It's not that the government left working people behind, rather, it priced them out and shut them out altogether. Net zero policies drove energy and food costs up and paychecks down, all to fill the pockets of green grifters. Protected monopolies shielded from competition keep prices high. Corporate welfare enriched insiders at taxpayers' expense. Gatekeepers blocked home building, resource development, and infrastructure, shutting workers from jobs and youth from homes. Licensing bureaucracies stopped immigrants from working in their professions, including in our hospitals, while mass migration drove wages down and rental costs up, and social services into the ground. And worst of all, inflationary money printing robbed savings and paychecks from working people while ballooning the assets of connected insiders. That is the inflation tax, the most unjust and immoral tax of all. It takes from those with the least without even a vote in Parliament. The inflation tax is when governments spend what it does not have on what people do not want and then prints money to pay for it, inflating prices. One of the worst, though not the first, was your very own Henry VIII. He used to have his minters melt down British coins and refill the inside with copper while extracting the silver and using it to make yet more coins. He put his face on the front of these very same coins, and when they would rub around inside people's pant pockets, the silver would rub off and his red nose would be exposed. Thus came the nickname Old Copper Nose. And Englishmen would know that their king had robbed them of the purchasing power of their money and of their silver every time they would look at his face with that right red nose. And if anyone wonders whether or not this caused inflation, here's a very simple mathematical reality. Silver content dropped by 75% and prices rose by 77% during the great debasement of Henry and Edward. Today's debasement has the same effect. An enormous gap between rich and poor has coincided with radical money printing in the Western world. Home ownership, you wonder why young people can't afford homes. Well, it's because the cost has been inflated. The number of dollars in circulation has been growing at 6 times the rate of the number of homes in the market in the United States, Canada, and the UK over the last decade. To be clear, housing costs less today than it did 55 years ago, if your money is gold. In fact, it's gone down by about half, if your money is gold. But if your money is dollars or pounds, it has more than quadrupled in that same time period. So it is not that housing costs are rising, it is that the purchasing power of money is falling. Meanwhile, billionaires leverage newly printed money, which, just like the aristocrats of Henry VIII's time, they touch before it loses its value, to balloon their assets. To be clear, fortunes earned through industry and entrepreneurship should be rewarded and celebrated. But having wealth inflated by government is not the same thing at all. We want people to get rich by making, not taking. Smith warned that when corporate and political power merge, the public loses. When corporations get ahead by having the best lobbyist, not the best product. When those with money turn it into governmental power and then turn that power back into more of other people's money, then the people pay the price. This form of trickle-down economics takes from entrepreneurs, workers, and savers to give to government, which then funnels it through bureaucracy, interest groups, lobbyists, with only drops trickling down to the people at the bottom of the pyramid who paid for it all in the first place. Ironically, those who seek to aggrandize the state tell us that this is all to redistribute wealth, like Robin Hood. Now, the theory was that if the government decided who got what, it would make sure everyone got their fair share, that altruistic authorities would abolish greed altogether. Because while humans operating the marketplace apparently are greedy, but in positions of government power, they are transformed into new and perfected creatures caring only about the well-being of others. But if greed can exist in the market, surely it can thrive in the halls of government power. As Macaulay reminded us, human nature travels everywhere man goes. Wherever you shed the honey, the buzzing flies will crowd. Wherever you fling the carrion, the raven's croak is loud. Wherever down Tiber garbage floats, the greedy pike you see and wheresoever such lord is found, such client still will be. If man is greedy, he will find a way to get rich by taking what government forces others to pay, just as flies take honey without making any. Whereas in the free market, the greedy man must sell things people choose to buy, much like the bee thrives by exchanging pollen for nectar to make honey and multiply flowers. We conservatives must be champions of the honeybees, or the strivers, as the great Lady Thatcher described them, the strivers whom she knew so well because her father was one of them, the daughter of a grocer, always carrying with her his memory in her heart, no matter where she went. From Stephen Harper and John A. Macdonald in Canada, from Thatcher and Churchill here, conservatives have always known that the greatness of the nation lies in its working people. We will champion them by again restoring meritocratic, bottom-up competitive economy, an economy where businesses compete through paying more wages to attract workers and lowering prices to attract customers, where business is disciplined by competition, not propped up by handouts, carve-outs, and bailouts. Economies that are stronger at home so that they can have unbreakable leverage abroad. Some of that leverage will be for Canada to have a deeper trade with many of our allies, especially the mother country. Otherwise put, we need free trade with other free nations. In 1994, Margaret Thatcher, the great Iron Lady, said, "Trade is the oldest form of exchange known to man. From ancient times, it was the most natural form of daily cooperation between peoples, whether it be in the smallest village or the bustling markets of Athens, Babylon, or Rome. The marketplace is not the invention of some academic economist. It is the daily habit of the people." And what is true in Babylon was true in 1994 when she said it, and remains true today. Now more than ever, Canada must begin to trade deeper ties with places like the United Kingdom. And one way is through free trade with old friends, strengthening the bonds that we have between us. For generations, Canadians and Brits traded, invested, and fought on the same side of wars. The United Kingdom has long been one of Canada's leading investment partners, and much is happening in the world today that needs to bind us together. With the authoritarian theocracy in Iran crippled and the Ayatollah dead in that country, we need to join with other free nations. We also need to hope that the Iranians will join the Council of Nations. We support Iranian people's ambition to have a free and democratic country, and we must secure our own borders and our homeland to keep ourselves safe in this dangerous world. We must also draw from the inspiration of the great Iron Lady, who is part of the Western Alliance of Free Nations, helped topple the Soviet Union and win the Cold War. We must strengthen that transatlantic alliance, and we must learn from her conviction and her courage. The same determination that reinforced us then must do so now. And today, I'm here to share an idea on how we can do that. It's to build on the guarantee of security and freedom by bringing together the long-standing ties that united us in the past. Supply chains right now that we took for granted are being interrupted. And when democratic alliances fragment, others fill the vacuum. If trusted allies do not tighten their economic and security ties, less trusted powers will shape the world, control supply chains, and set terms. That is not a future that serves our people. In such a world, warm words about old alliances are not enough. When the treaties and agreements that allow us to trade freely face upheaval, we need to double down and deepen our ties with our oldest and most trusted friends. Instead of shrinking markets behind tariffs, we should expand opportunities among friends. That is why I believe the time has come for a partnership between Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia, and New Zealand. A modern Kanzuk, a pact that opens our economies, removes barriers, recognizes credentials, expands skilled labor mobility, and deepens capital markets. Cooperation that helps us build stronger militaries and keep our countries safe from shared threats like China, Russia, and others. Our four countries have the free trade agreement and arrangement that is already in place through the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But we must go further, because tariffs are not the only or even the biggest barrier to our trade. More often, trade is slowed by regulations, standards, product approvals, licensing, and rules of procurement, etc. For example, Canadian beef is not able to make it into as many marketplaces of this country as it should because of regulatory obstacles. We must remove these types of obstacles so all of you can enjoy the heavenly splendor of beef from rural Alberta, if I do say so myself. We will work to remove such barriers to bring you these joys, preventing and ensure that entrepreneurs on your side of the pond have access to our markets as well. We will remove needless complexity because trust is already strong. So what would it mean in practice? One, we would have automatic professional recognition so that a doctor here could be a doctor there. If you're capable of doing a heart surgery in London, England, surely you can do one in London, Ontario. We'd ensure that we strengthen our healthcare systems across both sides of this great ocean and that we share the knowledge between our two countries. Next, product alignment. If something is legal in Sydney, Australia, surely it should be legal in Sydney, Nova Scotia, whether it's a car part or a medicine. That's why we need regulatory presumption of equivalence, so product approval is done in one country will be recognized in all other countries. Furthermore, we must allow mobility of skilled workers so that our youth can travel and work between these different countries, filling shortages, boosting economic growth at home and abroad. Fourth, defense procurement. We need to team up to ensure maximum contribution to deliver military equipment and weaponry at the lowest cost for taxpayers. Fifth, a critical minerals and energy compact. Canada has among the greatest supply of these incredible resources that we could put to use for freedom. We want to fuel the freedom of our allies by building up a strategic energy and mineral reserve that could be available in the event of war to those countries that have agreed to provide tariff-free access to Canadians. Under my leadership, Canada will create this wonderful reserve, this guarantor of our freedom. We have 10 of the 12 NATO defense critical minerals, and we want them to be available on the side of freedom in the event they are needed. There's also the opportunity for nuclear cooperation. We are the largest supplier of uranium anywhere on Earth. We invented the can-do, and we have much to learn from you on nuclear fusion. We should also strike an LNG supply deal. So all of your natural gas comes from Canada, not from Qatar, not from Russia, and not from any other unstable or hostile supplier. You need to have Canadian energy fueling your freedom here in this country. And so, le libre-échange est important parmi les alliés. C'est la meilleure moyenne pour rendre la vie abordable et pour nous rendre maîtres chez nous, de travailler ensemble pour partager ce que nous aimons ensemble, ce que nous voulons ensemble. C'est pour ça que je propose un nouveau partenariat entre le Canada, le Royaume-Uni, l'Australie et la Nouvelle-Zélande, qui va reconnaître nos qualifications, mettre en place une équivalence réglementaire, faciliter la mobilité des travailleurs, renforcer notre collaboration en matière de défense, créer un partenariat stratégique sur des minéraux critiques, comme j'ai proposé, pour rendre nos pays plus sécuritaires. Et comme ça, nous allons pouvoir partager nos efforts pour protéger la liberté et avoir plus de force dans nos négociations. At the same time, we must broaden our efforts to ensure that our people have freedom here and abroad. We need to protect our borders, ensure that we have solid immigration, which I don't believe should be part of the first steps of Kanzuk. And we need to ensure that we build upon the strengths of our countries, including in Canada, bilingualism, by protecting the French language in the context of this wonderful agreement. We, our country, share legal roots, parliamentary government, and a sovereign who stands above politics, a living symbol of our constitutional continuity. Kanzuk will be stronger than the sum of its parts. Together, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom will each be stronger at home with unbreakable leverage abroad. Conservatives around the world must not only unite in this way, but also to ensure that we open up opportunities for working-class people in all of our countries. In the last election, Conservatives were able to do that, adding 2.5 million additional votes, many of them in working-class communities. 46% of self-described blue-collar workers choose the Conservative Party of Canada, by far a record. We won in unionized logging manufacturing and mining towns that had never voted for us before. We won the youth vote. In fact, even in Election Canada's high school mock vote, we came far ahead of any of the competitors. If only they could have counted in the main ballot boxes. We need to build on that by offering a message of homes, jobs, and hope to our youth. We must be the party of balanced budgets and sound money to preserve and even strengthen the buying power of our people. We must lower taxes on work, investment, home building, and energy. We must unblock the production of all forms of energy, including oil and gas. We must remove all governmental barriers to home building so every youngster can own a home and pay off a mortgage. We must ensure jobs go to our people, not to low-wage temporary foreign workers. Canada and the United Kingdom share language, culture, parliamentary government, and most important of all, folklore, including the possibly fictional legend of Robin Hood. And by the way, I don't mean the medieval Marxists of 20th century retellings. Robin fought, as do we, for ancient liberties of the common people, to hunt, harvest, and keep what was theirs. His legend actually emerged in the times of the peasant revolts, seeking economic freedom by fighting against laws that banned workers from traveling for work or accepting higher wages. A legendary tax fighter, his nemesis, the Sheriff of Nottingham, was a tax collector. As Winston Churchill wrote, "Robin Hood is the spirit of the greenwood, the protest of the common man against the forest laws, the dream of the dispossessed. He is the hero of the yeomanry, as King Arthur is the hero of the knighthood. Whether he lived or not, he represents the reality in the hearts of the people, and the fame and his fame has outlived that of many a statesman. He personifies the English love of freedom and the popular instinct for justice, especially when it is denied by those in power." Though born an aristocrat, the great Winston Churchill knew the value of hard work and the great men and women who did it. He proudly joined the Bricklayers Union. He did this because while he had written 58 volumes of Nobel Prize-winning literature, he still respected the genius and the greatness of those who worked with their hands. One of my favorite Churchill stories is from the Blitz. After the worst bombing raids, he would go out and chat and hear the stories of people in the rubble of their former homes. He'd listen and comfort them. His bodyguard, Inspector Thompson, recorded in his diary that one day after a raid, Churchill was helping with the rescue workers near a bombed-out house. He went down on his knees to clutch an elderly woman who, while still conscious, was being dug out. For a moment, they looked each other in the eyes. Winston's coat was splattered with mud, the woman covered from head to toe in dust. Then, with a tremor in her voice, she said thank you and was taken away. Tears streamed down Churchill's face as he watched her. He stood in stone silence before finally saying, "There goes greatness." Churchill knew that the war would not be won by the political classes who fretted and prevaricated, by the bureaucracy, the kings, the queens, or even by prime ministers. It was the common people. Tram drivers and steel workers, tea ladies, barbers who dropped their scissors to pick up a rifle, mill girls who volunteered to serve as air raid wardens, men who rushed to the front line, faced gunfire, and never spoke a word of their bravery when they came home. Women who tilled fields, made munitions, and fought fires in the Blitz. They didn't grumble. They didn't ask for recognition. They did their bit. Conservatives have always known that the greatness of a nation lies in its working people, that there is nobility in work and resilience of those who fight their own battles, get knocked down by life, pick themselves up, and quietly get on with their jobs. And there is wisdom in the common men and women who build things, fix things, move things, and make things. So often we call them the ordinary people, but there is nothing ordinary about them. They are extraordinary. They are not famous. They do not make the evening news. When they die, there are no headlines and no words spoken of them in Parliament. But when they walk through Heaven's Gate, the trumpets sound for them, and the angels murmur, in the words of Churchill, there goes greatness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There are now drinks available, I think, in that room there. So please do join us.